We have more than enough acreage to feed everybody, more than enough supply and more than enough demand. But it's everything in the middle, right? That's the hard part. Everything gets a little jumbled up and lots of different like distributors and aggregators and processors and wholesalers and people that buy from this person who trade with this guy who then aggregates to this point and then ships to this place. So it's a whole like very complicated web. One, two, three.
Coming up, we're talking with the founder and CEO of Local Line, Cole Jones, all about their recent partnership with Chipotle, doing their local sourcing program, and where Local Line is headed over the next few years. The Modern Acre podcast explores the latest in business, investing, technology, and sustainability, and we're your hosts, Tyler and Tim Nuss. If you'd like to dig deeper with the Modern Acre, be sure to check out our membership community, the Modern Acre Co-op. The Modern Acre podcast is presented by Local Line. Local Line is the all-in-one local food sourcing platform for restaurants, grocers, and distributors. Use Local Line to discover and buy from thousands of family farms that sell every kind of product category, including produce, meat, dairy, and more. Whether you're a single location independent grocery store or a nationwide chain, Local Line helps retailers of all sizes build scalable farm-to-fork supply chains. To learn more about how to source local with Local Line, visit their website at www.localline.ca or click the link in our show notes.
Ty, big shout out to Local Line for sponsoring the pod the past few months. They've been an awesome partner to work with and just really love what they're building with their platform. It was fun to reconnect with Cole and just learn about all the progress that they've made since we originally had him on early last year. Like all the work with Chipotle is super interesting. And I think like the roll up the sleeves mentality of really getting the messy middle and creating value of like, what are the disconnects in the food system? How can we better connect end users to actual producers? I think is really unique with what they're doing.
Totally. No, thanks again to Local Line. If you guys haven't checked them out already, I'm sure you're going to be interested after this conversation with Cole because they're doing a lot of innovative stuff. And I really think that they can be really the infrastructure of the food system moving forward for all farms, connecting all farms with buyers of all kinds. So I think they could be a really big deal. But if you haven't checked them out, be sure to hit the link in our show notes. Check out their website, connect with them, whether you're a farm or somewhere in the food value chain and you're buying produce, buying crops, be sure to check them out. So Tim, in this conversation, we get into a ton here with Cole. We kind of cover a ton of ground, I think, in this conversation about Chipotle. What's it like working with the big Chipotle? And where is Local Line headed? How is fundraising going? How are they thinking about where they fit within the food value chain? There's a ton in here, and Cole gets into it all that I think is going to provide a lot of value to our audience. So we'll jump in with what's top of mind right now for Cole.
Top of mind for me right now, like today, is I've been pouring through a lot of our wonderful data from the USDA around local food like sales and market size and how they measure it. And I've been having a lot of conversations with our customers about where that data is coming from. And specifically trying to like understand what we're actually growing in America and where it's going.
Let's dig into that a little bit. Tell us more about what you're finding or maybe what you're not finding.
Okay, so I get these things sent to me all the time. And sometimes it's like investors or friends or people or whatever. And they're like, okay, hey, the USDA said in 2015, the total sales of local food was $11.9 billion or like some number, right? I think that was the number in 2015. We can double check after. And then in 2020, it went down. It was 8.7 billion. And then they have a new one that's supposed to be coming out in 2022. And anyway, like the most immediate thing that stood out to me was like, really, like local food sales shrunk over the course of COVID. That seems like totally opposite to the experience that we had, which then prompted us to like just ask a bunch of our customers. And so we work with thousands of farms, mostly in North America, but also in some other countries. And so, yeah, we surveyed a whole bunch of them in America. And we were like, hey, like out of curiosity, like what kind of data are you reporting when you guys get asked on these censuses, right? And Tim, I asked you guys the same kind of thing just out of curiosity. Yeah, and as it turns out, like not very much is the answer, right? And like certainly whatever they're reporting is not strictly adhering to what the USDA defines as local, which is either within the state or within 400 miles of like going farm to fork, is their definition. So, and yeah, you've sort of caught me in this moment now where I'm spoken to some of our customers today, and I'm like, well, what the heck is happening? Because my gut says that that number is much higher than it actually is, and my gut also says that that number probably didn't shrink during COVID. But I think it's just like this continued problem of ag being just not digitized in a lot of different areas. And yeah, as soon as you think you've solved it, you haven't, and there's more to digitize and just, yeah, get better data.
I know. I think the data is just so murky with USDA where like, what is a farm? Like there's all the numbers about like small farms and all of this, but like in a lot of cases, it could just be like a dentist on an acre that has a small vineyard planted and like that is a farm, that is a small farm. And so it's like really hard to like interpret, like, are these commercial farms? What does this number actually represent? And then on like the local thing, I think it's interesting from like our perspective, we're kind of a B2B contract grower for large processors and marketers. And like, we sell locally to a marketer that then sells to the national market. So it's like, yes, it's a local sale for us, but for them, they're selling in a bunch of different countries. So it's like hard for you in your position to like interpret what does this actually mean when you're looking at it.
Exactly. No, I mean, like we're working with quite a large food service distributor right now, which is like same thing. Like their biggest problem isn't actually like, are we doing local? It's like, we know we're probably doing a lot of local, but like figuring out what we're doing, that's the hard part for them. It's like, where is some of this stuff actually coming from? And then at what point does it get on a pallet or on a crate and like go to a customer? So there's, I mean, still the same old, story here, but like still a lot of work to be done on the data side of this industry.
So Cole, you mentioned, you're talking to your growers who have, grown over the past few years alongside of you with Local Line. You were on the podcast a while back, just announcing your partnership with Chipotle. Fill us in on the latest. What's been going on with Local Line over the past year or so?
Yeah. So as you guys know, and maybe for listeners that hadn't heard the Local Line story yet or listened to the first podcast that I was on, which, maybe was maybe a year ago, 10 months ago, something like that. So Local Line is the all-in-one, what we call the all-in-one farm to fork platform. And the way we started our business was by building software for the family farm to help sell that product direct to customer. And in a lot of cases, that's restaurants and grocery stores and hospitals and hotels and schools. And it's also consumers like the CSA boxes. And it was about a year and a half ago, might even been approaching 2 years at this point, where we did what you might think of as like turn on the buy side of our market, which was, we spent a lot of time getting farmers to use our software. And then we wanted to help them find customers better. And so it was around that time I came on the podcast where we announced our partnership with Chipotle. So Chipotle was like our first big kind of, call it flagship, internet or like national brand. And so, so a few things. Happy to report on the Chipotle side, that partnership's been amazing. I cannot say enough good things about their team and the people that are there. They are some of the best people that I've had the chance to work with. Our program is fully deployed now across their entire business. So all their distribution centers, all their growers, and our platform powers their entire local grower program. So that's their program where they make commitments every year to buy. I think last year it was 34 million pounds or 38 million pounds of local produce. And then this year, I think they still have to announce their number on what they're committing to, but they use our system for that. And so it's been a similar story for us over the last year. We've expanded with Chipotle. We bought a business called Forager last June, which is a marketplace to connect grocery stores with local farms. So that helped accelerate our push into the retail space. So we've got a nice footprint on the retail side now. And there's kind of three main areas that we continue to close these partnerships. We're working with large restaurant groups. We're working with retailers, so grocery retailers. And then we're working with food service distributors. And so those seem to be the three areas that are working for us right now.
That's awesome to hear. I'd love to dig into kind of like the execution of some of these deals where you have a lot of farmers on the platform that are kind of at like varying levels of sophistication. Like some are smaller farms that are doing more the CSA, like currently selling boxes of produce. And there's other that might be like on the medium to larger size farms that are doing more contract type business. How do you kind of like intermediate this. You're in a really interesting position where you can kind of see both sides of the spectrum, and like some farmers are better equipped to service those programs like a Chipotle or like other regional type customer. How's that going?
Yeah, I think like it is kind of amazing like how big the food system really is, right? And like how many different kinds of players that are selling food and buying food, and it's this wonderfully sophisticated, game of matchmaking and trying to like pair everybody up properly and do it in a pretty scalable way with software, right? So for us, obviously, the way that it normally starts with, if you want to start with like call it a national restaurant group or a retailer, is understanding what their needs are and trying to get very specific about that. Because as you guys know, it's not just, hey, I need jalapenos, right? There's a lot more that goes into actually like building a good partnership than just whatever the product like happens to be and the availability of it. So normally in this case, we're kind of starting on the buy side, defining very clearly what they need, and then going back to our network of farmers and helping make those introductions. That's a bit different for the CSAs that are selling to consumers. One day, I hope we can play in that space too. Like eventually, I'd love to have some form of an open market where people can go and actually, find products from the farm, not like some intermediary brand, but like from that farm and make a purchase. But it's step by step. You can't, boil the ocean. You have to just sort of pick what works now and keep building on it.
I want to dig in on two of the key things you mentioned. One is the Chipotle deal, and the second is, acquiring Forager. Let's start with Chipotle. Like, what is, you mentioned you can't say enough good things. Let's say some good things. I want to hear from you for working with such a notable brand and company. Like, what surprised you about the experience or about how they think about their supply chain?
A few things, maybe just comments on the people. They do what they say they're going to do. That's like it. It's so simple to say. They really do what they say they're going to do. They really believe in going direct to farm in as many cases as possible. I've seen them get very strong-willed, right? And that's like a core philosophy of, how that supply chain works and, the kind of people that they want to partner with or the kind of farms they want to partner with. I think like Chipotle is in an interesting position in the market where like they have a lot of really, really great brand value. A lot of that has been built up, over the years because of their strictness on food safety, the ability to go direct to the farm. They kind of have a reputation for this, right? And so in some cases, they're kind of a great first big customer for us because they understood the landscape very well. They understood the food safety and the supply chain and like how that operates very well. But they were running their local program at a scale where you're just not going to do it without a system like ours at some point, right? It's just you can't do it and not have a program in place to manage that volume. And so it was in a lot of ways a sort of like perfect marriage for, I would say both of us, not to put words in their mouth, but for both of us over the last year where we got to see up close and personal what excellence looks like in a direct to farm supply chain. And, they got to solve a lot of their problems, call it scalability problems if you want, by bringing everything on our platform.
Let's dig into the Forager acquisition a little bit. I think it's like pretty interesting to see a startup acquiring another business and M&A space or M&A happening in the space. Talk to us about like what precipitated that.
Yeah. You said it, right? Like as a startup ourselves, like we don't normally, I don't wake up trying to like figure out other like M&A targets and stuff like that. Right. But yeah, I had known the folks at Forager business for a lot of years, almost since we started Localine. We always sort of casually, kept in touch. And look, different people had different experiences during COVID. Like we happened to be on the strong side of like our business, had a lot of tailwinds and we were able to grow. In the case of Forager, you can imagine what happens to that kind of a business where it's basically like a marketplace for at the time was like restaurants and grocery stores. And a lot of them had to shut down. And so, the team did a great job pivoting and sort of finding their way through it. But it came to a point where we actually just looked at that business and thought, hey, you know what? This is a space that we're already getting into with Chipotle. We already had a couple other retailers, like sort of regional retailers that we were working with. And it's just organic, just, one thing leads to another. And they felt like it was the right time to move on. And we felt like this would be a really great tack on for our business, and it would help accelerate the brand for us, and it would help accelerate some of the customers and the referrals. And that is what's happened. I mean, like we bought the business in June, so it hasn't quite been a year, but it's been, we brought their team on and it's been great.
All right, cool. You alluded to a little bit about like the potential vision for Local Line and kind of playing in the messy middle of agriculture, of the food value chain. Like, talk to us ultimately about your vision, where you can see this going and connecting farms with buyers across different categories.
Yeah, we have more than enough acreage in North America to feed everybody, right? And then export a whole bunch, right? But like we have more than enough acreage to feed everybody, more than enough supply and more than enough demand. But it's everything in the middle, right? That's the hard part. Everything gets a little jumbled up, and lots of different like distributors and aggregators and processors and wholesalers and people that buy from this person who trade with this guy who then aggregates to this point and then ships to this place. So it's a whole like very complicated web. I think it should be much simpler than that, right? I don't like that the food that is grown the closest to you is the hardest to access, and in some cases people perceive to be the most expensive. That feels very wrong to me. And you guys had Bobby on your podcast a few weeks ago, who he talked about this concept for agrihoods, which is basically this idea that like it was actually pretty popular back in like the 50s and 60s. You'd have a bunch of like specialty crop farms, and everybody, the community, get together. You'd say, hey, what do we need? What do we want? Everybody would plan it out and you'd grow it. I mean, I just want Local Line to be like an agri-hood for all of North America. Like that's what it basically should be, right? Is like if we could get really good at just understanding what we're growing, give farmers those tools to actually get to market and market those products properly and do it in the most direct fashion possible. I would like to use that messy middle for what it ultimately should be, which is infrastructure for logistics and for distribution, as opposed to what it is today, which is like, my perspective is just clogging up a lot of the efficiency that could be there if we can remove some of the friction out of that supply chain. So at some level, it's frankly just like a transparency play, right, for our platform. And I think the way that you do that is just build really great software, build really great relationships with farmers, and then just keep building relationships with buyers that want to localize their supply chain at some level. And I don't know, man, just I guess keep your head down and hope at some point, the tip the scales.
Is this something, maybe it'd be helpful to reset on like the types, the size of farms that are on your platform, on your software, but is this a function of, ultimately getting every farm, even if they're not currently selling direct to consumer, doing CSA, that kind of smaller local farm? Is this a function of like, ultimately we need to get if we can get most farms of all sizes on this platform and have all of the data to aggregate this, is that kind of like where this could go?
Yeah, that's where it should go, in my opinion, is that I think if Local Line's really successful in the future, you'd almost look at our platform like a utility, right? It's almost like an energy grid or something, right? It's basically just a way for everybody in the food system to actually plug in and move food through a supply chain to shelves or to plates or to, homes, and just to do it in a way that promotes like the most diverse, like healthiest food system that we can have, and one that ideally gives the farmer a lot more control over the kind of business that they want to run, how they like what they want to grow, when they want to grow it, how they want to market it, what they're going to sell it at, just kind of get them back in the driver's seat.
Yeah, you and I have chatted about this, Cole, but like really excited about like the potential to connect farms with actual like end users, food brands that are interested in transparent supply chains, or they're interested in regenerative practices or whatever it is, where there's an existing supply chain in place that goes through a couple intermediaries and you kind of like lose that disconnect back to the farm. So I think you're in a unique position where it's like, yeah, we have a buyer that has an interesting tomato sauce and they actually want to tell the supply chain story of where those tomatoes come from. And most farms aren't in a position to actually like make their own sauce and sell that directly to the food brand. There's already supply chains in place, but be able to tell that story through the supply chain, I think puts you in a really unique position.
Yeah, that's right. And like, I think that's maybe where you might see our platform advance a little bit more in that area over time. I think we're really good today, like that direct from farm procurement. In the case of, like we said, like somebody like Chipotle who just wants to like build a direct relationship with the farmer and, buy their peppers or their onions or something like that. I think that this whole other area of the food system for us to go tackle is that, call it messy middle, where there's like value add products, there's processors, you're turning carrots into carrot cake. And just like, it's amazing. I'm injecting like one step in that process and all of a sudden everything like gets cloudy and nobody knows where anything came from. And like, it's way more complicated. So I think we can be helpful there too in the future.
Over the past year, Cole, you've done a lot. What's been like something you've changed your mind about over the past year?
I think sometimes we see this in ag tech, and I think I used to be guilty of this myself. But sometimes I think that we associate things that maybe are like good for the food system generally as good for the farmer. And that's not always true, actually. And like, actually, to be honest, actually, you guys also taught me a little bit here. I really enjoyed your story about trying organic and understanding why that wasn't a good fit for your farm and just in particular for your model. But I think that sometimes I think we have a lot of wonderful people working really hard to help improve our food system on like the regenerative side or the organic side or like the carbon side. Like pick your sort of like area of ways people are trying to improve it. But like the farmer already sits so far out on that risk curve that I think sometimes it's like the farmers are also, the reality is they have to live in like inside the existing system and like run a farm successfully with like the tools at their disposal today. And there's a certain amount of like things that they're willing to change, that actually makes sense in that moment versus like too far, like too risky, just not worth actually doing. And I think sometimes, that's been like not necessarily something I've changed my mind about, but I think it's something I've maybe just become a lot more like aware of, having now worked with more farms this year, trying to connect them to a customer. And there's like this supply chain in the middle, right? And you just assume it's going to be like sunshine and butterflies and rainbows, but like there's actually stuff that you have to work through there with that farmer in order for that to make sense for them.
Super critical stuff. Yeah, I think there's a lot that kind of gets overlooked when you just talk about kind of the grand vision of just like everyone should go organic or go regenerative, whatever it is. But like the reality is like there's a lot of margin compression happening on farm, a lot of profits decreasing with pricing trending downwards this year. So it's kind of hard to ask for reinvestment in certain areas when profitability is going down on most farms. So I think taking a step back and looking at that is super interesting perspective. Cole, want to talk about kind of the fundraising side of the business. You've been very successful fundraising. How's things going this year?
Our businesses, we're lucky. Like we did a round in December, so whatever that was, like a little more than a year ago. And as Tyler said, we've been busy. We had a good year. We've got a lot of great momentum right now. For now, we're actually pretty just like heads down and focused and trying to just a lot of talk about the market and like rates are coming down and markets are going to get better and, people are going to write checks again and stuff. And like, that's all well and fine. For us, there's like few more key things that we're focused on in our business. I think that we'll probably consider doing something later in the year.
Yeah. Looking into just execution into this year, Cole, like what are your points of emphasis over the next 12 months?
I think you're going to see some announcements from us with some really big names in the space that we're going to have to be able to start announcing and start working with, and like even much bigger at some level than I thought even like back then. Right? Was like I thought there was going to be maybe like phases to this, and like you'd kind of start with some regional players and then have the opportunity to maybe go and work with some of the big boys in the space, so to speak. But we have been really pleasantly surprised at the desire from some of these larger businesses to really start to understand the farms in their supply chain, right? Just from a transparency perspective, period. Not even just local, but just understanding where that product came from and who grew it. And there's even the legislation that's coming down the pipe with FSMA 204 stuff that's going to be coming through. There's a whole bunch of sort of like desire for that I even maybe myself underestimated. So we're very excited to announce a few of those this year. And the rest of the business is just keep doing what we're doing. We're like the brand we have for farmers is super, super critically important to us. And so we're just going to keep building features there and keep onboarding farmers as fast as we can. And then hopefully just get even better at building some relationships with people that need to buy a lot of food and make sure that when they buy a lot of food, it's local.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Cole. We're super big fans and excited to see you continue to grow. As we wrap up here, how can listeners get in touch and connect with you and Local Line?
You can go to our website. It's localline.ca. Our email is info@localline.ca. We have our phone number plastered all over our website. So please, email or call us anytime, and we'd love to hear from everybody.
So, Tim, what do you think?
Super fun catching up with Cole. I love checking in with a founder a year after we talked to him just to understand how the progress has been, and just having him talk through the Chipotle rollout, I think is really interesting, of just like how they've integrated on that platform. And within under a year, they're doing all the local sourcing for Chipotle, which I think is really cool and a testament to Chipotle's investment. And I know they have a lot of other big accounts in the pipeline for 24. So it's really cool to see the validation that their model is working, and they continue to onboard new farms and new buyer partners. So really cool to see their growth.
Totally. Well, again, thank you to Cole and the team at Local Line for sponsoring the podcast over the past few months. Check them out. The info's in the show notes. We really appreciate it. And we will be back on Friday with a special episode you're not going to want to miss.